we have, from left to right, we have Select Board Member Kevin Galligan, Mary Wright, myself, Meph Runyon, Michael Herman, Town Manager Kim Newman, Assistant Town Manager Mark Reel, and Molly Bates and Laura St. John Dupuis, who are executive assistants. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order, and do we have a preamble?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We acknowledge with respect that we are inhabiting the traditional lands of the Wampanoag peoples who have always existed here. We value their roles as past, present, and future guardians of this land.
Thank you. Are there any announcements? Yes, Kevin.
Just a quick one, Mr. Chair, and I think the town has put this out. I'm looking at Amanda and Mike Solitro. I think it was also in today's Chronicle. I just wanted to note for the public, applications are being accepted for space to use the kayak rack located at 72 Tonsett Road. Space is available for storage of kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddle boards with a permit. Permit fee is $155. Applications are due by this June 26, and you can find the information on the town's website, visit DPW, or just send Nate Sears an email.
Anything else? Next is public comment, and is there anyone in this room for public comment? Hi, Tim, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Tim Cunahan, 23 Herringbrook Way. By now, most of you hopefully have read the email I sent to our town moderator regarding his decision to call the Article 34 out of order and the written opinion on which his decision was based. It's all water over the dam now, but I wanted to get some of my thoughts on the public record. Honestly, I had thought that getting the town on board for a residential exemption would be a much easier process. I didn't realize how aggressive the resistance would be. I'm not going to read the whole email. I just want to review the last 3 paragraphs of town council's opinion, which I found confusing, inaccurate, inconsistent, and unsupportive of Mr. Kanega's decision to call it out of order. Paragraph 2 of council's opinion regarding Article 34 implies that the resolution might be more than a non-binding request and that there is no detail on its impact on other long-term planning in Orleans. Well, Article 34 is a non-binding resolution modeled after resolutions that you can find on other Massachusetts town websites, including Lexington, Brookline, Belmont, and others. Such resolutions are permissible, and council doesn't dispute that fact. Regarding the long-range capital plan, the town doesn't have one. I chaired the since disbanded committee and continue to advocate for long-range capital planning. Council's opinion shows a lack of knowledge and understanding of both of these issues. Paragraph 3 addresses funding of the residential tax exemption, describes and a description of its expenses. Town meeting approved funding for the RTE by a 75% vote. The numbers and their description come directly from Brad Hinode's last property tax classification hearing. Town council, again, didn't do any due diligence on the issues and doesn't know the facts on which he was passing opinion on. Paragraph 4 is the most convoluted and inaccurate. I'll quote it to you, and you tell me if you think it makes sense. Quote, finally, the question of a residential exemption is for either town meeting itself or for the Board of Assessors, or their recommendations are needed. This is not a question, that's not even a complete sentence. This is not a question within the discretion of the town manager, and this town meeting's direction is at best only advisory and not mandatory. As we all know, the question of a residential exemption lies solely with the select board. I didn't state the town manager has any discretion over the residential exemption. She is, though, responsible for directing the assessor's expenditures of these funds. I came to town meeting prepared to address the details that town council felt were unclear. Most of her concerns were addressed in my submitted description of Article 34, which for the second year, town management chose not to print in the warrant. I received no notification that my article might be out of order. In fact, council's written opinion never states that fact, that it is out of order. Was town council's opinion just a casual opinion, or is it a legal one grounded in statute and precedent? All water under the bridge at this point, but I must say that I'm disappointed in the town's approach to dealing with issues that it doesn't support. Citizens should be allowed to voice their opinions, and town meeting is the biggest stage on which that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else in this room for public comment? Peggy, is there anyone on Zoom?
There is.
I can't read a name, so go ahead. You'd have to identify yourself, though.
I think I'm Joanna Stevens. I'm representing Lower Cape Pride. It's an event that that is going to occur on the 13th, 14th of June. We're celebrating June Pride Month, and just wanted you to know a little bit about our activities, since most of them will be in the Orleans area. Last year was our inaugural year, and we had a great turnout. We're hoping for the same this year. We're very excited. And so our mission is to increase LGBTQ plus acceptance through educating, empowering, and mobilizing towards a more inclusive, welcoming, and diverse local community. And I think we're doing a really good job of that. We've been working with the town of Orleans and other nonprofit organizations and businesses to celebrate the month and celebrate activities that are beyond what we're supporting. So most of our activities are on the weekend, but there's events and activities happening throughout Orleans and the Lower Cape area for the month. Just wanted you to be aware of generally of our schedule. So Friday, June 12th, we are going to gather at the Alley in Orleans, and from 6 to 8, there's free all ages bowling, so free for anybody. And at 8, we'll have a drag show featuring Mackenzie, which is a family-friendly performance. Then on Saturday, we're hoping for good weather. So far, so good. On Saturday morning, we're gathering on the green next to the library at 9 o'clock for some face painting and some lovely music and performances by the Batteria and the Ken Fields band. And both of those musical performances will be part of our parade. So we kick off at 10 o'clock, walking down Main Street, which will be closed with the help of the police details. For a brief amount of time, we've let the businesses along Main Street know that this will be occurring, and many of them are hoping they're putting out our pride flags in support of us. So we're walking down Main Street. We invite anybody to join us, allies, family, anybody. It's a fun time and very colorful. We'll be ending up at the Tap House in Orleans around 10:45 for some addresses by some local dignitaries. Hadley Luddy, I believe, is scheduled, and we're hoping Julian will join us as well. We'll hear from our grand marshals, who are very active on the Cape, and one of them is a Stonewall survivor. Their names are Bob Isidore and David Bermudez. So they'll give a short speech as well. And then at the Tap House, we'll have just some conversation, some fun. There'll be some children's activities, and we'll also have drag with Mackenzie again at that time. Then on Sunday, there are several inclusive worship services across the Cape. So all of these activities are on our website, and our website is lowercapepride.org. You can get more information there. And if anybody has any further questions, you can email us at hello@lowercapepride.org. That's our email address. So we're very excited. Your fire department and your recreation department and your police department have been very helpful, and I really appreciate all of the coordination efforts. So thank you.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
and good luck.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the room?
Mr. Chairman, if I have to make one comment for the public, if I could.
Sure.
The Orleans Citizens Forum will be having our annual meeting and a presentation on the value of the arts as an economic development driver. That will be on Thursday, June 11th at Lower Cape TV. And hope to see, we're going to have performance and art demonstrations, as well as a speaker from the Americans for the Arts to talk about the value of arts as a economic development driver. And I know that's an important topic for many of the folks in town, so hope you'll be able to join us.
Thank you, Mary. So I'll end public comment and move on to agenda item 5, which is from the Orleans Conservation Trust for a conservation restriction approval by the Select Board. And Stephen O'Grady, welcome.
Mr. Chair, before Stephen comes up, I do need to disclose, it's on file in writing, but I'm also a trustee of OCT, but I do feel that I can act objectively and fairly in this matter.
And I'm also a trustee of the trust and also have my information on file, and also feel that I can act impartially in this matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you all have a memo in your packet from me, and then I believe you also have a recommendation from Town Council that you can go ahead and approve this conservation restriction before you on 32 Locust Road. And so, of course, this is the conservation restriction that is consistent with Article 29 from the May 11th annual town meeting that was overwhelmingly approved by voters, and then the Orleans Conservation Commission at their meeting yesterday morning, unanimously approved this conservation restriction as well. I know several of you have approved these documents before and are quite familiar with conservation restrictions, but just to reiterate what's happening here, the CR, the conservation restriction, is giving the town a legal interest in this lot, 32 Locust Road, and it will be owned by the Orleans Conservation Trust, thereby allowing the town to have this legal interest in protecting the property while keeping OCT in the role of managing the property and taking care of maintenance needs into the future. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions and hope you'll approve this tonight.
Any questions from the board? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I have a problem with this because, you know, once again, we're in a situation where we're repeating something that's happened in the past with a property acquisition like this. I questioned this before we voted to put it on the warrant and support it for town meeting, because my concern was having parking on this property and developing trails on this property, and who was going to be responsible for that. I alluded to what happened down on Port-a-Nimiket. So we kind of postponed action. Stephen came in to speak with us on April 1st, I think it was, for that meeting. And at the time, you know, explained the difference between what happened at Port-a-Nimiket, where the town somewhere along the line decided to maintain ownership of the trailhead because it gave us access to other town-owned conservation land there, and so agreed to develop an 8-spot parking area and build and maintain 8-foot wide trails as well, so that we could access the town-owned property through the Conservation Trust property. That's why we ended up as a town paying for those improvements to the conservation property that the trust owned. In this case, Stephen came in, we had a discussion about the proximity of this parcel to the downtown, that we were in the midst of implementing our new overlay district to create more housing opportunities downtown, to help create the vibrant walking downtown village that we've sought to do for so long. And that, you know, I really felt that, given the case, we should encourage people to walk to this property as part of that walkable downtown village, that we should not be putting parking there, that we should not have, you know, the burden of more traffic on the back roads, or, you know, even the environmental impact of more vehicles rolling through downtown in this area. And so, you know, Stephen, I think you listened to what I had to say, we had some discussion. You alluded at the time that you agreed to me and that you only contemplated 2 or 3 spaces there. I think it was Michael asked that we make provisions for, perhaps if we're only gonna have a couple of spaces there, they should be handicap spaces so that everyone would have an opportunity to access the area. Meth, I think you alluded to, or having access for kayaks and fishing opportunities and whatever. And so, you know, we agreed that we would revisit it. I think, Kevin, you said that we would talk about the land aspects of this, the land management aspects of this property at a different meeting. That all being said, we voted in favor of it. So now we have a proposal for 6 parking spaces and trails, no provision for handicap spaces, and no discussion about land management aspects of this property whatsoever. And, you know, I'm concerned that, you know, this town has had situations where residents and citizens of neighborhoods have been impacted by these open space acquisitions. I think the OCT is, you know, was sued, went to land court. I think it's in mediation now over properties on Henson Way for the exact kind of thing of talking about one thing, and then once the property was bought, creating something different in the eyes of the neighborhood. You know, we've had similar issues with questions about the overuse of Kent's Point. We've had issues over, you know, Weesit Point and the town of Orleans advertising it as a recreational area when it was private property. You know, all these things, it just, you know, one after another, and here we are again, you know, where we question this. We were told 2 or 3 spaces. We were told we'd have an opportunity for discussion about land management of this parcel, and yet here we are, 6 spaces, gotta do it right away, because it's gotta go to Boston, get signed and whatever. And so, you know, under these conditions, I'm gonna vote no on this right now. And I think because it is an issue that has ramifications, multiple ramifications on the use of this property, you know, I would ask Kevin and Meth to reconsider their notion about they have, you know, no real problem with being involved in the discussion on this, because I think the trust does have a problem with this when, you know, you came in here and you told us 2 or 3 spaces, and then you give us this, 6 spaces, no land management opportunities for a discussion about land management, and you gotta do it right now, because we gotta go to Boston and have it signed. I don't like that. I'm voting no on that, even though I think, you know, this is a great acquisition. I think it would be a great opportunity for people downtown to walk, to access the pond, but not under these conditions. I think we've been, you know, subjected to the same old, and it's a bait and switch, and I'm not voting for it.
If I could respond, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
So, Mark, I hear you completely, and I agree with exactly what you recounted about what I said at your earlier select board meeting, and none of that has changed. What this is a conservation restriction that is a perpetual land protection tool that is designed to be for all time. And so whenever we are drafting a conservation restriction, we are trying to foresee as much as possible, including lots of different changes that might occur in the future. So the Orleans Conservation Trust plan for this property remains a couple spaces. There's nothing in this document that would prevent us from having a handicap space, from having one of those spots be a handicap space. And there's nothing in this document that prevents us from being able to continue that collaborative relationship with the Conservation Commission, who will hold this conservation restriction, and with you all, to the extent you want to be involved in those details about land management decisions on the property. I do think it's important to say here that you're hearing a lot of support from the Community Preservation Committee, from the Conservation Commission, and I think I can say fairly from town voters for the job that the Orleans Conservation Trust has done in balancing public access needs with preservation of habitat and ecosystem values. And that is something that is core to our organization, and we are very sensitive to legitimate concerns about overdevelopment of properties whenever we're devising public access for a property. So to reiterate, the plan remains a couple parking spaces, but I'd like to encourage you to imagine a future where Cedar Pond is a premier pond, right? The town is going to continue, I hope, to invest resources, as it did at the most recent town meeting, in the restoration of Cedar Pond. There's a beautiful red maple, white cedar swamp that is contiguous with this area. I have not been involved in these conversations, but it has been proposed, or at least talked about in the past, that that could be a great site for a boardwalk. And so the last thing we want to do at this stage is tie our own hands with respect to this acquisition in terms of the maximum amount of parking that could ever be there. But that would, if we wanted to expand that parking area, that would most definitely be a conversation with various town entities.
So would you be willing to reword this to say 2 spaces? And if you want to expand it in the future, then you can come back to the board and to the Conservation Commission and expand it?
I think we could definitely handle that via a separate document. That's not quite the way that the state handles conservation restrictions, but I would be very comfortable continuing to work with the Select Board and the Conservation Commission on the public access plan for this property. I'm saying that now on the public record. I will reiterate that in writing. This is just, there is this time sensitivity, Mark, that you've alluded to, where we have a state grant that requires that we record this conservation restriction by June 30th, but that does not mean this plan moves ahead. This is not a plan, to reiterate. It doesn't mean we would.
Just for clarification, if I can too, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead.
Stephen, I don't know if you can answer this, or this is something that one of the attorneys has to answer, but Section 7 in your document, B7, alludes to parking. It says the grantor has the right to create and maintain an unpaved parking area within the premises for not more than 6 cars, and the right to allow parking on said parking area to accommodate public access to and use the premises. So we're giving you the right to have 6 spaces with no recourse to come back and say, hey, you know, you're doing something that we didn't, you know, that you said 2, but we gave you the right to do 6, and you can do 6 without even talking to us about it. I have a problem with that. Secondly, when we talked about handicapped accessibility, you know, that, again, my desire was no parking so that this could be a walking park for the downtown district. But, you know, the question came up about handicap spaces to allow everyone access to this parcel. Is it not true that handicap spaces are required to be of a certain size and dimension, that they have to be paved, that in order to create handicap spaces here, what we've got about the unpaved parking area does not permit handicap spaces per se? And so again, that's not serving what we talked about we should be looking to serve at that meeting on April 1st.
So there are options for conservation areas. And in fact, we have one in South Orleans at Orleans Conservation Trust Window on the Bay Conservation Area, where we have a formal handicap parking space, and it's hardened surface, but it is not paved. So again, I don't believe there's anything in this document that would prohibit us from accommodating handicap access at this site in the future. I do want to be clear that I am not promising that. It's costly to provide that, and so I'm not saying OCT will provide this, but I will say that we'd like to, and there's nothing in here that prevents us from doing that.
You know, and again, I'm just concerned that we're signing off on this with, you know, giving you the right to have 6 parking spaces, no requirement to have handicap spaces. And even though, you know, you say, you know, we'd like to do that, and we could do that, whatever, but there's no guarantee, and we're signing off to let you just have 6 spaces down there that we said we didn't want, or at least I did, and I think other people agreed that we wanted to keep it. Meth, you said, should be walkable. We talked about maybe kayak access, so I'm not sure if we want to try and create some kind of town landing on this road, in the impacts of that, if we want to have people that have access to the pond for fishing, for kayaking. So I just see these things that are out there that are gonna turn this area that backs up to all the residences on Locust Road, that we were hoping could be a walkable conservation area for the downtown, turns into something much bigger that we have no control over because we're signing away our rights tonight. And that's why, without something in writing that addresses those issues, I'm not willing to vote in favor of this tonight.
I would also just add that any parking that is created on this property, I believe anywhere along Cedar Pond Road there on this lot is subject to Conservation Commission jurisdiction. And so this is not going to be the end-all be-all final approval. And again, this is not a plan, right? Our plan, as I'll say a third time here, is a couple of parking spaces along Cedar Pond Road there. But this is what we will be beholden to for all time. And so we're trying to preserve options, which is always what we do with conservation restrictions, to the extent that the conservation values are not being jeopardized.
Mary?
But the next, in that same paragraph, am I misunderstanding? Because it says, prior to creating the parking area, the grantor shall submit to the grantee for grantee's written approval a proposal of the design and location of the said parking area. So does that not give us the ability to say
Yeah, so the
Six.
grantee is.
hard course is not what we had in mind? Am I
correct.
reading that correctly?
My interpretation of this is the grantee is the Conservation Commission, but yes, that's gonna come back to the town of Orleans.
Right.
To the Conservation Commission. They already voted in favor of this. They didn't question the parking like we did as the select board.
That's correct, but
So,
it still says
I
that
hear what
plan
you're
would
saying,
do it.
Mary,
Right.
but that does nothing for us.
I guess I would say that, I guess I would say that it does help us in the sense of if there is, if it's recorded that we're very concerned about the number of parking spaces, it seems to me that the Conservation Commission, to me, has never been the group that's decided, oh, yes, let's have 49 parking spaces. And maybe I'm assuming that people will do the right thing when given the opportunity, and that may be a mistake. But I think, given that there is somewhat of a check and balance in here, which I understand may not be sufficient for what you're looking for, Mark, but at least that's giving me some comfort that it's up to 6, is the way it's written. And so, and I appreciate the concept of, we don't know what the total future is going to look like. That's really not clear to us. So I can see how I could get comfortable with the idea of it's up to 6, and there is some check and balance from the town's perspective. It's not the select board, but it is from the town's perspective. So, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm the one who brought up the handicap accessible. I think this is a little disappointing. I have immense respect for you and OCT, but if you knew that you weren't going to be able to do it at the time and that there was going to be this overarching plan for the future, I wish you had let us know at the time when we asked for those things that generally, guys, we appreciate you asking for them, but we're going to submit a plan that is going to be what we're thinking of a long-term plan that is going to be more spaces than what we're talking about today. You didn't do that at the time. I get it. I believe, of course, we can trust the OCT and you, and that you guys will work to, if you say there's going to be a couple spaces, there will be a couple spaces. We're all going to be here for a long time working together. And, I have, again, immense respect for you guys and the properties you manage and what you've done for the town. But it is a little disappointing that we don't have any recourse on this. But I'm willing to go forward with this based on your assurances. I know we all don't know what's going to happen in 2040, 2050, and things like that, but, documents can be changed in the future. They all are, at least in our town. But if we're going to do this, I do want to make sure it is handicap accessible. It's accessible for all of our residents, these properties. And I guess that's all I have to add to this.
OCT would be delighted to work with the town, I think, to make this property handicap accessible. The town has the interest in Cedar Pond Road. OCT will hold ownership of this lot. The town has the conservation restriction interest in this lot, which again does not prohibit in any way, to my reading, handicap access. So I think we're moving forward here in aligning our interest, and OCT and the town have partnered on a lot of parcels across town. Henson's Cove Conservation Area is not one of them. The town doesn't have any interest in the Henson's Cove parcels. And OCT and the town, to my knowledge, have never had issues where we hold the CR, the town owns it, OCT owns it, the town holds the CR. We have always worked effectively without conflict to manage those properties in the past.
So we'll have handicap accessible, and we'll limit it to 2 spaces, couple spaces too. I read that, I hear that as a couple. I'm just trying to be clear.
Yeah, I can't promise handicap access, because that's a cost that, you know, we haven't planned for. I think if
So
the
are
town
you-
is here representing that it's willing to chip in the money to make this handicap accessible, I think,
But I think
Yeah,
that
we're-
the town has
we're-
expressed, you know, before we had these discussions, that we were going to, you know, it was understood we were gonna have handicap accessible. And then we did support it, and we did go to town meeting, and we did support $150,000 to go to this project. So in my mind, we have contributed to what would, based on our assumptions of what the property would be available to all residents and have handicap. That's my understanding of this. So we can go back and forth, you know, but I do appreciate, I hope we can work together to make sure we can achieve these expectations. And it's not always back and forth. So I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
I have a technical one, and it's a board call. At the outset, I made a disclosure that's been challenged by a board member. I'm happy to recuse, I'll leave the room, and I think you, as Mr. Chair, probably should as well. If the board feels that we cannot be fair and impartial in this matter. I believe I can. I've not been directly associated with this transaction. I've read the materials equally as all of you have, including that section that says, prior to do any parking, a written approved plan, including the design and location, has to be done by the town. I mean, it's important to read all these things together. But if the board feels that we bring bias to the table, I'm happy to leave. So I do want the board to indicate a sense of either support from Mr. Matheson that we cannot vote, or if you feel we can, it's your call.
And go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I don't feel that it's a situation of the chair or Mr. Galligan not being able to be
You
unbiased.
said that. It's exactly what you said.
What I was, is, I feel that it puts you in a difficult position, Kevin, is what I'm saying. Not that you.
That's my call.
Be unbiased, it's your call. And I just didn't want to be putting you in a difficult position, because we have cases in the past where there has been litigation or whatever, and I didn't want to put you into that
The
position.
town has never been involved in that matter.
I understand that. I know it's not the town, but there have been citizens in the OCT, and I didn't want to put you in that position. That's the only reason I said that. I don't question your integrity one iota. I never have, and I never will. Same for you, Mr. Runyon. Never have, never will.
So I just want to say a couple of things too, and that is that I was involved with this town's open space program for years before ever becoming a trustee of the OC, or Orleans Conservation Trust. And my feelings about conserving land and conservation easements were formed then, and they haven't changed a bit in the years. And I start with the sort of baseline that anything we do that stops a house from being built on it is a win for the town. And that's part of what's going on here. And I've also been pretty much on Mark's side with the conflict between recreation and conservation. And I've really been much more interested in habitat preservation and conservation than I am in creating trails and public access. So I do completely understand the impact that the recreation interests have on conservation lands, but it's not a conflict for me, because if I wasn't on the board of the trust, I wouldn't be looking at this any differently. Oh, and I just want to say too, technically, this is a conservation restriction. It's not a plan. And I think we're getting those two things kind of confused here. This is, as I understand it, I'm not even sure who drafted this, but is this a state-created document?
Yes, so this was drafted by the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust, Mark Robinson, Executive Director of the Compact, here in the room with us, very closely following the model conservation restriction that's provided by Mass Division of Conservation Services. So there's specificity that you fill in with each property, but this is largely a template document that the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs provides.
Go ahead, Michael.
You wanted a sense of the board. I'm fine with you guys voting. I think it's up to your decision, and that's I appreciate you disclosed, as you always do. And again, it's your decision.
Go ahead, Mark.
You know, I'm fine with you voting. As I said, I brought that up just because I didn't want to put you, either of you, into a position that might be troublesome later on. My sole objective in bringing this up tonight, I truly am a backer of our preservation of space, like you, Meph, for preserving the habitat, for the animals that live there, for the wildlife that's there, for the flora, the fauna. I'm not a big fan of getting open space and then building parking lots and building trails and just running people through there, because when you do that, the animals disappear and the natural space is degraded. So my only concern here is that we had talked about no parking or really limited parking on this area, and now we come back with not 2 spaces, but 6. And that's why I have an objection to this, that I think in its proximity to downtown and for the best interests of preserving that property, no spaces, or something for handicapped access, okay, but, we talked about that a month ago, and here we are now, something comes in and says, oh yeah, we have the right to create 6 spaces there. And that's why I object to it, and that's why I'm concerned, and I don't know if it's the state document or the Cape Conservation Trust's, boilerplate puts in the number 6. I don't know where that 6 came from, why it's there, because our discussion was to have 2 at the most. And that's why I have a concern about this, that when we sit here and talk about it and the reasons why we feel it should be limited, and we talk about having 2 or 3 and having handicapped, and come back and it's no handicapped and it's 6, that bothers me.
And you, Mary?
I'm fine.
I still feel capable of, and okay with voting on this, which I intend to do. Anything else for this first article, first article on our agenda? Then, could I have a motion from someone?
I can make a motion, Mr. Chair. I would move to support the conservation restriction for 32 Locust Road proposed by the Orleans Conservation Trust, and that we find that the 3.78 acre restriction is in the public interest of the town.
Second?
So, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No, but I would just add, to repeat, I do hope we have further conversations and we're able to do this, and in the future, if we do have situations like this, we know ahead of time what the thought is, because I'm not one who likes to be put up against the wall when there's a time constraint that either way, I'll leave it at that, so, but thank you.
Okay, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So this passes 4-1.
If we could, Mr. Chair, because we're on this tight deadline, we're hoping we might grab your signatures tonight, and we have Mark Robinson here prepared to notarize those signatures.
And would you like to get that done before the end of the meeting?
If you would,
In the folder,
So that's what I have here?
one page.
So let me just hand it down there and you can start. Well, so do you feel okay notarizing, Mark, with,
I'm witnessing you right now.
okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
E and L.
Yes.
Seemed like it.
Do you want a copy of this now?
You can, do you want it now, Molly, or can you?
No, it's fine.
I'll
You
get
can
you
just send
going.
a,
We'll scan.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. Number 6, we have the Pleasant Bay watershed permit revision. George?
George Meservey, I'm here with Carol Ridley, the Executive Director of the Pleasant Bay Alliance. And I'm here for what I think is the culminating step of the update to the Pleasant Bay watershed permit. I can provide you with a summary, but I've given you a cover memo. Would you like to hear a summary, or would you like to just ask any questions you have regarding the IMA update?
Anybody?
Just a quick summary.
I'll give you the 3-minute version, okay? So what I've given you is a staff cover memo, a memo from the Pleasant Bay Alliance, a red-line version of the updated IMA, which looks 90% identical to the current version. You also got a copy of the watershed permit letter from DEP and the permit itself. These materials went to all 4 of the Alliance towns. So this is the final step in the permit process. In 2018, Orleans, the Alliance entered into a watershed permit with DEP to limit current nitrogen loading in Pleasant Bay. Since 2018, several changes have occurred that necessitated us updating the watershed permit and updating the IMA. The original Massachusetts Estuaries Project report from 2006 for Pleasant Bay was updated in 2020 to reflect changes in development, that is the nitrogen loading on the land side, as well as hydrology of the bay. In 2023, you'll recall the DEP adopted new regulations for watershed permits and revised the regulations on Title V. And they included in there some regulatory leverage for towns that did not enter into watershed permits. I won't get into that unless you want to. The Pleasant Bay Alliance revised the watershed permit. It was reviewed by this board, in fact, signed off and approved on February 28th, 2024, as a new 20-year period for a permit, and it was submitted and ultimately approved by DEP in February 2026. It provides obligations for all of the 4 towns to meet the requirements to clean up Pleasant Bay. What it does for Orleans is the IMA ensures that your other member towns are doing their fair share of the responsibility to clean up the bay. So that is why we have that, and there's an agreement among the 4. I think Carol has a comment on what the other towns are doing, if you wanted to hear that before we get any further.
Thank you, George, for that excellent summary, and good afternoon. So I've been meeting with each of the Alliance select boards, Alliance Community Select Boards, We've met in Chatham, and there was one word change that was included in the copy in your packet made to the IMA. I met with the Brewster Select Board on this past Monday, and they requested a change to the wording that, so it didn't make it into your packets, it happened after that was distributed. It essentially just reorders one of the whereases that was already in the document and adds a clause. So the whereas relates to these new regulations promulgated by Mass DEP, whereas on July 7th, 2023, Mass DEP promulgated new watershed permit regulations governing the issuance of and modifications to watershed permits, and this is the new part, including the Pleasant Bay watershed permit issued in 2018. So I think this change just moves that whereas up to be the third paragraph and notes that the regulations apply to the prior permit, which they do. So there's really no substantive change resulting from that, but I wanted you to be aware that that's what was voted by the Brewster Select Board. And we'll cycle that comment back to Chatham. I don't know if they'll accept it or have to revote it. And that will be included in the presentation to the Harwich Select Board on Monday, along with any other changes you may propose.
And just one final word. Your wastewater management advisory committee did review this document and voted unanimously to recommend its approval by you.
Kevin?
Yeah, I was just going to echo that, and thanks for mentioning that. And Carol, I don't see that whereas is material in any respect to the terms of the agreement. One thing I just want to remind the board, if you do look particularly toward the, I'll call it, the required interpretive pages of Chinese and Arabic and everything, the very last table is really the most important for us. And it's a reminder of, and Kim knows this well, our regulatory obligation. We say it over and over again, but if you look at this table, you can see under the Orleans column the measures that we've implemented, including fertilizer control, Lonnie's aquaculture, and PRBs, but also the multiple phases of sewer. And the reason I'm raising this, because you can read it, you all know it, but from wastewater management and likely at a future select board meeting, you are going to get asked as a body to pursue more than just what's here as far as regulatory obligations. We have one individual in our community that is pushing for what's referred to as a TMDL in the Nauset Estuary. That is not our plan. This is our plan. This is a regulatory obligation. This is what we've signed up to meet, and by ratifying this tonight, sticking to it. All the way through, the bulk of it will carry us all the way to phase 9 of sewering. Phase 10, 11, we can kind of figure out where we are as far as the performance of all our efforts, but I just want to give you a heads up. There are other pressures in town asking us to do even more than this. And I think it's important to, again, keep clear and laser focus on meeting these obligations. They are significant. We're doing great. In fact, when phase 4 gets done, we're well over 60% of the obligation, which is great. But I just want to get that out.
Go ahead, Mark.
This might be a question for Kevin rather than George. Kevin, on table 2 here, where it's the nitrogen removal requirements, the revised ones.
Right.
As you go down the list, you know, there are some of them in terms of the increase percentage, some are pluses, some are minuses. So in the ones that are the pluses, for instance, like Meeting House Pond, there's an increased requirement. You with me on that? It's like
Which page you on? Because I,
like page 8 of the
It's the- Yeah, it's this thing.
table 2.
I'm getting to it.
It's one for you to address. I think you should address this.
See it. Go ahead. Yep.
So, you know, as I said, going down through that list, I was looking at it, and I see, you know, like for Meeting House Pond, there's an increase in our required removal. For others, like the Upper River, there was a decrease.
Right.
how does that affect, because we've already done phase two, and, to address Meeting House Pond. And we've looked at some of those adjoining areas as you go down Bolly Neck Road and adding those in. Have we done enough there to meet these revised requirements, or are we gonna have to come back and revisit phase two in order to meet these new requirements?
We should be good, because again, they look at this in total.
Uh-huh.
So if one area is plus and the other area is minus, so we do monitor these to be sure that the overall phases that we put targeted reductions are going to meet the plan.
Yeah.
But George, you can probably add a little bit more.
In Meeting House Pond, you recall, it's a kind of a teardrop shape of the watershed. The entire watershed for Meeting House Pond needed to be sewered and was sewered. So that picks up the new growth that's happened in the next 20 years, picks up the few vacant parcels that are going to be redeveloped. It picks up the future growth when people put additions on or businesses go in there. So once you've picked up that whole area with sewer, it's just an accounting to make sure we count it right so we get full credit for it.
Okay.
Now, just with regard to phase three, when we get to phase three, the Wastewater Management Advisory Committee recommended and the town ultimately adopted a right-sized phase three to make sure that we were meeting our obligations, and in fact, removed some areas that were in the preliminary study going to be sewered. They don't need to be.
Right.
But the sewer around there, so we could sewer them in the future if the future holds that.
Right.
So ultimately, when we get down to the bottom of the table, just in the Orleans total column there on the far right, we went from basically 17.7 to 25.9 to 26,000. So it was a total.
That's the total, yeah.
Yeah, the total.
But not enough for Orleans. Orleans is the next column over.
Orleans went from 69.80 to
yes.
73, yeah.
Sorry. When I said all the way to the right, I went too far to the right. So we went from 69 to 73.
73.
Or almost 7,000, actually, 69. So those relatively small amount of increase that's there, we've accounted for anyway.
We have.
Yeah.
And again, this will be revisited every 5 years. So we'll be showing performance of what we've done so far and taking any new data that comes in. Just a tangential thing, but we're making more of an effort to study the health, again, thanks to the alliance work of marsh systems, that attenuate nitrogen at literally no cost. So the more we can prove the attenuation is working and provide credible evidence to DEP, we could actually revise numbers to our favor. So there are a lot of things going on that cause these to adjust, but we think we're on a very good track, provided my comments about the Nauset Estuary, we really stick to the plan, you guys. I cannot emphasize that. Is that we get distracted by other areas that DEP is not interested in at the moment, it could get us really derailed. I'm really, can't emphasize that point enough.
Anything else? Go ahead, Michael.
Nice to see you, Carol. Thank you for coming. George, thank you for the explanation. I'm, of course, supportive of this. I think it's fantastic what this has done in bringing our communities together to work together. And I just wanted to note for us, or I'd love to see on page 2, for some of the conversations I've had over the years, it's, where here it's nice to finally see that all parties agree that wastewater, fertilizer, and stormwater are the prime sources of controllable watershed nitrogen. I know we're looking for innovative alternatives. We're chasing the newest technology and always what's going to be out there. We're spending a lot of taxpayer dollars doing that. I think there's a balance. First you take care of the core things then you look to the things that may be not developed yet, or I'm always looking for new technologies, but you have to take care of the things we know, and it's been exciting. I think you probably saw that, now we have 6 towns that passed the fertilizer home rule petition, and Harwich, Eastham, and Truro passed it in season. So the things that don't cost a single penny to anybody and that can have an immediate effect of what happens now is, of course, fertilizer. And I know we're up on supporting our stormwater too. So thank you.
Do you want another mic?
Just
Yep.
another one that, Carol, maybe this is one for you. I'm spreading it around here. One of the other things that stood out to me was the, again, back on that table 2, with Muddy Creek. Where Muddy Creek was opened up.
Mm-hmm.
And, the new culvert was put in there under Route 28, and it just, huge, big impact on the flow coming and going through there. What a huge revised difference there is for the Muddy Creek, for the upper and lower, both. What's the, what was the reason for that huge impact? Was it that we opened it up and now all of a sudden stuff that had been kind of dammed up and nitrogen stuck in the creek because it couldn't get into Pleasant Bay, now it's all going into Pleasant Bay, and so it needs to be dealt with?
No, I think it really isn't that. But there were adjustments to the attenuation factors for upper and lower Muddy Creek subbasins rather. And that was a factor here. Along with other changes in attenuation, in the disaggregation of the Pleasant Bay subwatershed. It's quite complicated to discuss at this meeting, but it was, I believe, the attenuation considerations were a bigger factor here. The flushing effect that you're alluding to was already factored in to the prior study.
Yeah, I was just wondering why that seemed to be a really significant jump there.
Yep.
And what the cause of that was. I mean, 400%, obviously, it's a huge thing, so. Okay, thank you.
I just had a couple of questions also. This is Table 2, also as it relates to Table 5. And specifically Brewster, there's 2 things there. That was the only town that had their removal requirements lowered. And I'm not sure what the explanation for that is, but beyond that, the removal requirement is slightly more than the projected actual implementation plan results. So I think the revised requirement is 2039, and the projected implementation results are 1,984. So according to these charts, Brewster doesn't quite reach its requirement.
That is, Brewster needs to work with the DEP to demonstrate they have a fallback plan if their fertigation methods and other non-hard solutions don't work. That they have agreed to work on those things through the watershed permit and report back to DEP, and it's up to them to satisfy the DEP on that.
Yeah, and I would just add to that was presented at the meeting this past Monday. The select board heard the fallback plan. It's called a conventional plan, so basically it's a wastewater treatment plan, should they not be able to meet their obligations through the fertilizer controls.
Okay. Is there a vote that we need to take?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could, I would move that we adopt the revisions to the 2018 Pleasant Bay Watershed Permit Intermunicipal Agreement as presented and authorize its execution on behalf of the town.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Thank you very much. We'll
Thank
be
you.
circulating a document for your signatures.
Thanks very much.
So let's move on to the affordable housing property tax exemption. And Tim, you're leaving on and this is,
Tax exemption.
Mr. Chair, I do need to recuse from this matter, so.
Good evening, Elizabeth Jenkins, Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development. Here to present proposed program guidelines for the affordable housing tax exemption. So you'll all remember this was approved at a special town meeting in 2025. And the objective here is to provide an exemption to property owners in Orleans who are renting year-round to tenants at affordable rates. And there are a series of program parameters that are dictated by the statute, but there are a series of rules that the select board must consider and formally adopt to implement the program. So again, when we put this, when we pass this at fall town meeting, we passed it without, without those parameters in place, deferred those to later consideration by the select board, and it has come time to do that before this goes into effect July 1st for the next fiscal year. So with the cooperation of Brad and Mark Reel in the town manager's office, again, we went through the various program parameters. And there are three that I really want to highlight tonight. The maximum amount of the exemption, the income limit for tenants who are in these qualifying households, and then the affordable rate of rent. So again, this property, and I do want to highlight before I go through the memo, that I think this is, a very aligned with all of Orleans's efforts to try to promote year-round housing in our community, to get our existing housing stock utilized more efficiently, as opposed to just having sort of a production approach to new housing, but how can we use what we have more efficiently? And it's a great complement to a program that we've been running for almost a year now, our Lease to Locals program, which provides an incentive for property owners who have either seasonal rentals or vacant rentals to put those online for year-round rentals. So now, again, this is a great combination in that folks who have entered the Lease to Locals program could now be eligible for this exemption. So again, baseline eligibility requirements are folks have to be owners of a property as of the new fiscal year. Staff is not recommending that this program be limited directly to residents of the town. It is an option to put a requirement that you be a resident, but it is not outlined in these program parameters. So first, exemption amount. So generally, exemption amount, as provided in the statute, has to be based on square footage of the property, essentially square footage that is dedicated to affordable housing purposes. So originally we looked at applying this in a way that was proportional. So the proportion of the property that's being used for affordable housing purposes to the overall square footage of the property. But we found that, again, we would have to do that calculation for each application. Those numbers could be variable and not always equitable for very high value properties and very low value properties. So we looked at what other communities were doing, and Harwich uses this tiered structure. Where they offer different tiers of essentially a flat rate at different tiers. So the exemption amount being proposed here is based on 3 tiers. Small units receiving a $1,000 exemption to their property tax bill. Larger units receiving up to $2,000 exemption in their bill. So that's exemption amount. The second, I think, really decision point here are who is living in these units. So your tenant qualification. The select board must establish this limit. And per the statute, you can establish any limit, but the maximum income that a tenant can make is 200% of the area median income. So what's proposed in this document is to allow tenants to make the maximum allowable income under the statute, 200% AMI, and you'll see that table outlined here, what those figures are. It's very high, but we certainly know that there is a housing crisis at all income levels across our community. We just have a lack of available housing, whether you qualify for affordable income restricted housing or whether you are working and make higher income limits. Either way, it's very hard to find rental property in Orleans. So that was the basis for the recommendation of going up to the statutory maximum of 200% AMI. Lease term, again, per the statute, do have to verify that there is a year-round lease on the property. So there are verification requirements that Brad's office will address to ensure that all units that are all property owners who are receiving this exemption do lease their property year-round. And then the third major decision point here is what rent can those property owners charge to the tenant, the maximum affordable rent limits, and that must be established by the board. So we considered the fact that it is the program's intent to encourage affordable rental rates. So we looked at, staff looked at rent limits for households earning up to 80% of the area median income. And we looked at various programs. Again, some looked at the HUD AMI limits, just taking 30% of the income of somebody making 80% AMI. We looked at the fair market rents. Those varied a little bit. Sometimes we thought the fair market rent was too high and the affordable rent was too low, and vice versa. So we tried to even that out by taking an average of the fair market rent and the 2026 affordable rent for households making up to AMI. So that would be, again, 30% of the income of somebody earning up to 80% AMI. And then administration, again, we would begin, I'll let Brad cover this in more detail, but we would begin accepting applications almost immediately for the next fiscal year, and Brad would be using the standard application provided by the state, and so we had, again, Brad and our finance office take a look at this. Again, I think the idea that we are using those tiered exemptions provides us a lot of predictability in terms of the impact on the overlay this year. We've tried to estimate what participation might be. Very hard to tell, because I think we could generally have some indicators of the number of year-round rental units. So, for example, we have about 50 in our rental registration database, but we don't know what rents they're charging. But even at low, medium, high scenarios, with the certainty that the tiered exemption approach provides us, we're confident that even at a high participation scenario, we would have plenty of room in the overlay to be able to accommodate this. So again, I'll let Brad add anything from his end, and then we're happy to take questions or walk through this further.
Good evening, Brad Highnote, Town Assessor. As Elizabeth said, my office will be the sheriff on how this gets administered, as with every other statutory exemption we have. The application period, as she said, runs from July 1st all the way to next April 1st, 2027. That's the statutory period for every exemption we accept. We'll use, as she said, the state has already provided us with an application. We use the state application for all of our exemptions. We'll use the one they gave us. Micah and I will work out and insert, once you've approved whatever guidelines you want to go with tonight, we've already prepared we already have an information sheet prepared to go with every application, so that anyone who takes one will know what they're expected to provide us. Income verifications will be with tax returns, or some form of any way to show that will let me see what a year's income looks based on the household. There's also a utility allowance included in that. So how much of the utility the tenant has to pay for versus what the landlord pays, all of that factors into that base rent number that you see in front of you on the memo. And then after that, it's my job to figure out which tier you fall into based on what you are renting on your property. The 500 square foot one could be a couple of rooms of your single family house, could be an ADU, could be a finished basement, whatever the case is. Tenant will have to prove that they live there as their domicile. As we said, the property owner does not have to be domiciled. This can be someone who lives off Cape and chooses to rent their home to someone year-round. That person would still qualify. As far as enforcement goes, it'll kind of just be on us to make sure everyone's following the rules. People submit applications under pains and penalty of perjury in any exemption. So there are fines that come. If you lie, we will catch you. To give you an idea of what this looks like, as Elizabeth said, Harwich has already accepted. They accepted for fiscal 25. They got 6 applications in their first year. For this fiscal year, that went up to 10. I don't know how that would apply for us. I know at our counter, we've had 2 people come in, both released to locals participants, asking when will this start. So I know we'll get 2 applications for sure. As she said, 46 properties are currently, well, 50-ish are registered as long-term rentals. We don't know how many of them will qualify because I don't know what they rent for or how much the person living in them earns. But this will all be stuff the application process will suss out as we go through it. And people have most of the fiscal year to get the application in and get us what we need. So, and we've done this before. We know how to get paperwork to prove the case. If we ever get audited, we'll have our tracks covered. With that, unless there's anything else, we'd be happy to take questions.
Questions? Go ahead, Mark.
So, just because I don't know the answer to this, I'm asking you, and I think it would be informative for everyone. We're talking about an example of, say, somebody lives off Cape, they have a house here. They have, a relative, son, daughter, whatever, that's, says, hey, I'm gonna go live at the Cape House and, like, work part-time while I'm doing my master's degree online. And you're gonna charge me X number of dollars for rent, and I'm gonna declare a Y number of dollars for income, and I qualify for this. Is that something that could happen, or do we?
Don't see why it wouldn't be.
Is that legit to do that?
Yeah.
So family
I mean,
members.
as long as there's something that proves the person living there is using the house year-round. I think that's making an empty house a year-round residence for somebody.
So family members can actually.
Sure.
Take advantage of this, and yeah.
Yep,
So, yeah, I'd rather have Junior living down here than in my basement in Boston kind of thing. It's like, go ahead.
sure.
Yeah, all right.
Mary?
Oh, yeah, they gotta pay rent.
Got to pay rent. Got to have a lease.
Have a lease.
Got to have a lease to
So,
fall
I
back
mean,
on. And that lease better say 12 months on it.
Do they have to prove that the rent's actually getting paid?
There are, yeah, yep.
Okay.
They're gonna go to that much effort.
This is a lot of paper. This is going to be a lot of paper, but that's the name of the game.
Mr. Chair, I will say that this would apply to me. I have an ADU that I do rent, so I hope I can still, I think I can go ahead and ask questions and vote on this. I believe, I don't know if that means I should recuse myself from this.
That's a question only you can answer.
I think I'm good, but I guess I was trying to figure out the rental rates. How do those get adjusted year to year? I understand the median income obviously changes based on what the feds say, but how does the rental amount get changed every year?
Fair market rent is the same thing. We get
Okay.
new figures every year.
Okay, fine. I had one other question, and I think you answered it, was, I was thinking about if someone is, strictly on Social Security or something like that, those kinds of receipts would work still as showing income, even though it's not, quote, it's not a job, it's not.
Correct.
You're not getting a W-2, okay. And then I had a question on how you calculate the utility allowance, but that, I think we're good.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Michael?
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you, Brad and Elizabeth, for doing this. This is fantastic. I was very excited when it passed at town meeting. The only question I have, I'm kind of confused on the AMI gross income, okay? I love the rents, and I get how you're stabilizing them. The AMI, to me, seems a little high at 200%. If you take these at 200% and you times it by 30%, and what your cost of living expenses might be, you're even at the 190, 200,000, you're about at $5,000 a month. These rents are at about $2,000 a month. So I don't want to lose or exclude I really don't want to lose these properties to people paying at the topper echelon and not being able to, because in one aspect, we're saying we're going to focus on people that are making 80%. And that's how the philosophy of setting the rent is. Setting the income, we're on a philosophy of let's go to 200%, the highest. Those, in my understanding, don't jive in the respect is if you're trying to keep your cost of living expenses at 30% of your income. And that's what we're trying to do. So it kind of throws it off. I know it's going to be a slow start. I'm happy to go with this. I would hope we can really look at this closely and see and annually review it and see if we need to adjust it. You're going to know who's getting these apartments. You're going to know their income levels. I would like to see people at AMI and below, making sure that, I think that's, was the goal of this. The goal of this was to make affordable housing. Somebody who's making $200,000 a year, if they're paying only $2,000 in rent, which you can see on these charts for a one-bedroom or a studio, they're only paying 1% of their salary on rent. I want that deal. I don't think there's a single person that wouldn't want that deal. So that's where I'm kind of seeing there's room to kind of massage this to make it, maybe it's not the right, make it more equitable for what our goal is, which is to create affordable housing. The rest of it, fantastic, getting residents, getting properties unlocked so that people can use them and utilize them full year round. But I'm willing to go with it if that's the wish of the board. But I would like to make sure we have clear review process annually and that we're able to adjust that if necessary. And would that affect somebody who's already in a place? Of course, you can't kick them out. But like Brad said, I don't think there's going to be an immense amount of properties that from the start that it doesn't sound like that are going to take advantage of this. That's question one. So if you have any comments on that?
Yes, I mean, there's a clear disconnect. I recognize that in that we're setting that AMI very high at 200%, but we're not setting the rent equally at 200%. And in talking about that, I think we really thought that this is to incentivize people to rent at affordable and fair market rates. And again, I think while you
When
may.
you say people rent, sorry to interrupt.
Or
you
property
mean
owners.
Property owners to offer their
property
properties
owners
at
to
fair.
offer their
yeah,
property
at affordable
in something
rates.
aligned with fair market rent. And while you might have the scenario in which you have somebody who has a significant income getting a very good deal on an apartment, I think you are much more likely to find scenarios where people who are in units currently are cost burdened and they are paying way more than 30% of their rent. 45% of our renters in the town of Orleans are cost burdened. They're paying they're paying above 40% of their rent. We have a number of people in our rental assistance program that are paying 50 to 60% of their income on rent. So I think our thinking was, while certainly we don't want to exclude folks at those higher incomes, we're really trying to target and I think send a message that if we are going to create an incentive for this, we would like to encourage rental rates at a fair market rent. And I think if you look at the table and the rents that do qualify, based on my personal experience and observation of the market, these are still fairly generous rents that that we do see aligned with what is being offered.
Yeah, I would agree if I may, that absolutely. I think the rents are fine, as I said. I just think the disconnect is with the income.
Understood.
But if we're going to work on that, I just don't want to see people who are, I believe the number is much higher than 600. I think our in need is closer to 800, 1,000. I think I've always said that, and we haven't done much so far yet. We got a lot of things in the pipeline, but we haven't tackled that yet. Of people that are cost burdened and in need in this town. So I'm supportive of this. The second question I have is how this sits with lease for locals. Are they allowed to do both? And
Yes.
so they can get a, not double dip is probably the wrong word.
Not
but-
double
but
dip,
how-
no.
How does that work?
So we're at the point where we're at about the year mark of lease to locals. We have been having conversations about whether or not there's any value in multi-year incentives. Generally, in lease to locals, you see, between 60 and 70, so across all of their markets that our program administrators work in, they see about a retention of 60%, 70% of participants continue to rent in year two. So what we're going to do at this point is do a survey of our lease to locals participants, ask them if they do intend to sign on for another year. And using that data, I think we will make some recommendations into whether or not we want to look at a multi-year incentive program under lease to locals. That was not our intention. But yes, I mean, this was paired. This was designed to pair to with lease to locals. You get that initial bonus to go from short-term rent to year-round rent, and then this continues. This is acted as an incentive to keep people participating in the program in year-round. I looked at the lease to locals folks that we have participating. We have a total of 7 fully participating. We have 2 more almost across the finish line. Of those, 3 people will qualify because they're renting at affordable rents. We have a 4th that's just renting a smidge over. So, this would be a great incentive for that person to say, hey, maybe I can adjust my rent to be aligned with this one and still come out even at the end. That's exactly what this program is designed to do.
If I can just follow up. So,
Yep.
I mean, I guess to me, like, as I said, I'm supportive of this. I think it's fantastic. I just really think that the AMI is too high. I just feel like, I don't want teachers, firefighters, home health care aides that aren't making $190,000 a year.
Yeah.
Maybe they're making $100,000 a year. They're gonna be competing
Yeah.
with people who make $190,000 for that apartment or that rental, right?
This is true. I will say, and I think one of the things that I get concerned about in sort of traditional affordable housing is if you have a teacher and a firefighter and they're both income qualified, and then they want to get married and create one household,
But that's a
the
hyper-
2-person
that's
income
like the
limit
perfect-
doesn't double. Like it notches up at a small increment. So I really do, especially under the looking at the goal of creating more opportunities for families in Orleans, like that is a deficit that our income restricted housing, it creates. It doesn't create that opportunity for 2 income families to be together. So, I think this is another way to say, yes, we can still support that teacher and that firefighter, but we can support them as a 2 income family going forward.
Okay. I mean, I leave it to your expertise, but I just wanted that clear, and I do want to make sure that we review this and we're able to see in the future, because I don't want people saying, I make $100,000, I make $125,000, and I'm losing out places to people who are making 200, 220. That's not what I'm here to, we're here to affordable housing, and of course, workforce in this town, in Cape Cod, you make $125,000 a year. That's a good salary.
Right.
I mean,
But still not even close to enough to afford a single family home.
no, not a single family home, but it is enough it is enough to rent here.
It
And
is,
so-
but I will also, again, not to argue, but I will also point out that we do have a lot of income restricted housing that has come online recently. We've
Okay,
had Fair,
so
we've
I
had
got you, I got
107.
you.
There's not a lot of space for those people who are above 80. It's just a missing segment.
Missing middle.
So, I'm missing
Okay.
it.
My turn?
Sorry.
That's okay. I have a few, I can counterpoint to Michael in that I'm thrilled to have the 200% AMI limit. I mean, I think that this is maybe the first real program I've seen that is going to invite the sort of attainable housing, missing middle kind of people. So I'm happy to see that. Now, I heard the word apartment come up. These units have to be 100% filled with the tenants, or this isn't going to be, like, the owner can be in part of the house and rent out. They can? So this is, okay.
A senior, let's say, on Social Security with 3 bedrooms in their house, living alone, can rent one out and at least get the $1,000 exemption. Put it that way. As long as there's a lease and the tenant qualifies qualifies under income, yes.
And so the rents that are charged, this is just the maximum? The owner is free to charge less?
Yes. I think that's the way the statute is written, that there is a maximum rent, inclusive of utilities. Yes.
Okay. And one of my other questions is, do the leases have an ironclad guarantee for the tenant that should the property be sold, that they can continue to occupy it until the,
I don't think that's something I'm allowed to weigh in on for that, no.
So
I want to see the lease say 12 months. That's the biggest thing for me. If, I mean, protection from selling the house, I mean, I'll know if I award an exemption, let's say to 19 School Road, and then 19 School Road sells 6 months into the fiscal year, I will have questions for the person, but is this still going to be used as a rental? Because this is enjoying an exemption of $2,000. And if your plan is to kick these people out, that's going away. That's part of the enforcement on my end.
Right, but I think there is a wording that can be inserted into a lease that prevents a tenant from being
Sure.
evicted during the term of the lease. And is that anything that we would have the ability to control?
I don't think so. So this is not, so we have not, you do not, so that's traditional in, say, if a unit has a capital A affordable deed restriction on it, that rental rate, that tenancy does survive a change in ownership. We are not requiring that these units have capital A affordable deed restrictions unless we don't have control over those provisions, the typical buying and selling of property that may affect renters.
But, just to carry this to another step, if somebody owned the property and qualified and had gotten the exemption, and even got, a tenant in there with lease to locals, put it on the market and sold it, what recourse do you have to recover anything from them?
I can revise the assessed value and get it back.
Well, but that guy, the owner's gone.
Yeah, I'll still get it.
So
Even
you would
if a
get
house
an
hits the
assessed
market,
value.
I know about it before I know about it well before it sells. I track this stuff a few times a week.
Okay, I think that's it for me.
Do you really think it applies to bedrooms?
Oh, actually, just one other thing that came to my mind was, was there any thought as to, if you're talking about an out-of-town property owner, if they own 5 properties, we would allow them to do all 5, if they had the right tenants? And I'm really getting at the idea of, do we want to include investors in this program?
I mean, my take on that is if they are renting year-round, if they are renting, even if you do not live on the property, a property might have an accessory dwelling unit, and if you're willing to rent that year-round at an affordable rate, why would we want to exclude, why would we not want to provide an incentive to that?
Okay.
And I hate to muddy the waters, but I don't want to provide you with incorrect information. I am not 100% sure. And I think, if you want to provide direction on this, we can. But, I mean, it clearly says that this applies to residential unit owners who rent units to an income qualifying person at an affordable rate. I know we just said that you could potentially rent a room in your house. I think we need to sharpen our pencil on that one a little bit. I don't want to provide you incorrect information. I mean, if you want to provide some direction, yes or no on that. But as I'm reading the guidelines, it clearly speaks to units as opposed to bedrooms. And the example it gives are units as opposed to bedrooms.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that, other than,
Yeah.
in my mind, this was looking to me like creating opportunities for the families that are averse to renting a place, like renting a fair kind of project,
Yeah.
and they're looking for a freestanding house to rent. If we go back into a partial rental, you're getting back into the single person who's, childless, and that's, for me, the group that we've already spent enough time dealing, serving.
We have a couple of big projects
Yeah.
teed up to deal with that. Yeah.
Anything else from anybody?
Like a motion?
Sure.
Chair, I'd move to adopt the proposed guidelines of the Affordable Housing Property Tax Exemption Program as presented for the implementation of fall 2027.
FY '27.
I'm sorry, FY '27.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been seconded. Any further comments?
Just that we're going to review this annually, right? And is that in
you
there?
like, yep.
That it's reviewed annually to set the parameters?
It is not, but if that is an amendment that you'd like to make, we can make sure.
I would like to make that amendment so that we can track this with you and really see how it's going and make any adjustments, and it doesn't slip through the cracks, or not that it will, but thank you. So that's the motion.
Okay, and second. And all in favor, say aye.
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 I'll abstain.
And so we have 3 ayes and 1 abstention. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the comprehensive permit. This is you, Amanda?
No, she's leaving.
No.
She
is
said, no way,
Elizabeth.
not mine, out of here.
So take it away, Elizabeth.
It's not technically me, but I'm happy to speak on it. We do not have the applicants here this evening, and that is because the application in front of the town is a comprehensive permit application in which our zoning board of appeals acts as the comprehensive permit granting authority for the Governor Prince project for all local boards, including the select board. So this ended up on your agenda because all boards are required to get notice of the hearing. We have had one hearing at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that has been continued to June, I believe it is 24th, the third Wednesday in June. And they have kept the Zoning Board of Appeals kept the public hearing open to see comments from, again, other local boards or agencies on the application. So to the extent that this board has jurisdiction, I know there were questions about the sort of very broad and general fee waiver that the applicants put in there. We have asked both the applicant and our town attorney for clarification on the extent of that. I had a good conversation with the representatives from Habitat for Humanity. I believe that was the origin of the fee waiver request in that Habitat. You know, they have a very I think, standardized way of pursuing these 40B permits, and they typically seek waivers from fees that do not essentially cost the town revenue. We may forego revenue, for example, in a building permit fee, but anything that would cost the town additional money, it's not traditional to seek a fee waiver in this sort of partnership situation from that. So I acknowledge that there is that lack of clarity. I think from what I have heard in the conversations that I have had, there seems to be some general acceptance in sort of following that traditional habitat model, but where we don't have a policy established. So for example, the privilege fee for sewer and water. I know I've been to Board of Water and Sewer to talk about the potential for consideration for affordable housing projects, and we don't have that policy. So I think the general thought is where we don't have a policy, we would not be open to granting fee waivers if there are there are cases that have been consistent with what we've done in the past, for example, a building permit fee, then we might encourage the board to have that dialogue and consider it, again, pending further clarity from the applicant or additional advice from our legal department. The second thing I think it would be great for the select board to comment on is the issue of local preference. I do believe this is in the purview of the select board to make a local preference request. So this is, again, the idea that if in the initial lottery for these projects, you can request from the state, it is not automatically granted, but we can put sort of a fact-based request together to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, indicating that we have a housing need in that Orleans residents should be given preference, sort of first preference when we do the lottery drawing in that initial lottery. So we still have very strong support for that local preference request. In the last ZBA hearing, I would recommend that the select board make a recommendation to the ZBA to put a local preference condition in that comp permit to the maximum extent possible, and then behind that, a regional preference request. We saw a lot of applications come through in the Fair development, in the 107 development. 107 did an amazing job. I think they had 80% local preference in that project. So we know there's still a lot of need, definitely in Orleans and in the Lower Cape. Let's make sure that we're serving those folks first with this development.
Who would like to start us off?
Just a question for the local preference part, would that affect Habitat for Humanity, where those are, how they run their organization, and essentially becomes an ownership for those people, as opposed to the polar part of the project that's rental?
So they would definitely have to be two separate applications, but yes, I believe you can put a local preference on a homeownership lottery. I've done many local preference requests for rental lotteries. I can't say I've ever done one for an ownership lottery, but I think yes, it's for, under the sort of local initiative program structure, I believe you could put a local preference request on that as well.
You don't know if Habitat does that?
I don't, but the very traditional condition in comprehensive permits. So if it is allowed, I would assume that other communities ask for it as well.
Okay.
And I would jump in line. I just want to follow up. If we're sending in an application for the local preference, do we want to include the regional preference in there as well, not knowing yet whether other towns are going to be contributing financially?
Right. I mean, I would definitely prioritize Orleans residents, and then to the extent that behind that can be prioritized regional preference, yes. I will say even without that, in the Fair development, for example, 90% of those units went to folks in Barnstable County. So we're seeing a sort of a natural filling of those units from the Cape. I know there's some narrative to the contrary, but really very few off-Cape residents are applying in these.
Yeah, that really wasn't where I was getting. I was thinking more regional, like
Yeah.
in 4 or 5 town area down here. But to me, that was an incentive for the CPCs in those towns to contribute money because they were going to get that benefit.
Yeah.
And it would seem to me that if we can make that available, that we might find, financial contributions from other towns.
Yep, understood.
Sorry to jump in. Who would like anything? Kevin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think it's really, really important that we show strong support. As we know, and I was really pleased to watch and hear the chair of ZBA say, when he got some pushback from his members, trying to change the entire design. And as Kim knows, we put, as the town, a request for proposals. We received 2, evaluated them. This ship has sailed, people. So again, I hope some of the ZBA people are listening, but you are not going to literally do away with some massing on a property that is suitable for this massing. But I do have concerns, as I've shared with a number of people, about the one line that is looking for some relief. But I think it's more important to not get wrapped around the axle, as they say, on water and sewer fee relief, because I think that'll work itself out over time, because we have other boards that are interested in that. I'm mentioning your former board at Water and Sewer. I know they're curious, because that relates to revenue. But I'll keep it brief, Mr. Chair, if you allow me, and keep deliberation going. But I would move that we support the comprehensive permit application as presented for 67, 67, Route 66, and 67, Route 6A, with the request that Orleans applicants be given local preference to the extent allowed, a regional preference that would apply to both the rental and homeownership units.
Second?
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded, but I'm assuming the conversation will continue?
Yeah. Yeah, I watched the ZBA. I think that the chair did a good job trying to rein it back in. I thought you did an excellent job answering questions. I was on the Affordable Housing Trust for 5 years. We spent a year on this project at least, and the RFP process that was just mentioned. and figuring out the units and the breakdown and all of those things, which, I don't know, maybe it's my inexperience, but those aren't really the ZBA questions about need and the makeup of which apartments. You know, I thought, maybe again, I'm wrong, they're more focused on zoning and setbacks and height and things like that. So I think I'm glad they finally came around, and I think they're definitely supporting the project. It is a town project. It is something we, as a community, have invested a lot of energy, time, and I think it's going to be an amazing project. I do respect some of their comments regarding the large massing. We knew these were going to be big buildings. You can't fit that many people, and, you know, I'm one on the board, on the trust, pushing for more units. So, you know, I think they settled at 78. I think they're going to go back knowing that group and those architects that are going to go back and listen to the comments. And I think it's that building number 2 that is the real question. I do hope that we get to, I think it's important that we see some point of views from the street and the things that we saw in the past. We saw some images when we were doing the RFP. I didn't see those in the meeting. I may have missed them, but I think there's going to be a lot of view block, if you will, from the townhouses. I think it's an amazing project. And I know we're working with an amazing group, so that I know they're going to work with us. And I was very excited just to say, I know, we know we're striving for net zero, if you will, on the project. I was really excited to see, well, I was very excited to see the solar panels on the roof, and I know they're trying the more they can. I'm always going to want more green spaces. I always think that, I heard the parking discussion of the 1.4 units. I would even be up to bringing that down, but I leave that to them. I think green space and where children can play, luckily there's a lot of other places right nearby that they can play. And we also have, of course, our amazing beaches. So I think it's great, and I don't know if we're doing 2 motions or 1 motion, but I support this. The only thing I would say is, just for everybody listening, the local preference, again, is for the initial sign-up. And local preference isn't just a resident of Orleans, right? I mean, local preference is somebody who works here or has kids in the school district.
So it does depend on how we write it,
Exactly.
but
So
typically, my recommendation would be to write it, live in Orleans, employed at a business in Orleans, or with a student and in this case, it would be Orleans Elementary School.
Okay, and is there some time limits for that? I mean, we don't want somebody just jumping in, grabbing a job and sending an application.
Right, so,
You know,
no, there, much like the last discussion we had, there are verification requirements, and the folks who administer this are certified lottery agents, so it's not just anybody who can do this, so you have to have a certified lottery agent to conduct your lottery, and they have to be aware of the verification requirements and have all that paperwork in place.
And I would suggest the motion then, after that process goes through that local preference, then it can go regional.
Yep.
You know, but the first crack is for our local preference of Orleans. And into Meth's comment, just as the CPC was asked to participate in some other projects, housing projects this year in other towns. I know that was something big when I was on the trust, that of course the fair project it was one of the first big projects and had a lot of towns contributed. Since then, towns have gotten their act together a lot and are building their own projects and realize we can't give to every town and then build our own projects too. So I think that is going away a little bit. So I'm not sure how much we're going to get support from other towns, since we're not supporting other towns. So it's yeah.
It's a balance, yeah. I mean, certainly, I think there's incentive to add a little money if you're another town, because then your residents do get local preference. But I think both CPCs and developers are pushing back a little bit against the expectation that a project will go to all towns to try to seek money.
Quick one, Mr. Chair, only with Michael's question and Elizabeth clarifying, if I could amend the motion that's on the table to say local preference means for those applicants who live, work, or have students at the elementary school. That would be our definition of local preference.
Elementary, not middle school?
I mean, I leave that to you. So we definitely had a conversation about the wording in prior local preference requests and that we have a regional school system. And is that, is that preferable? Is it okay to say El Nasset Regional School System, or do you want it to be Orleans Elementary School?
I think I would go with.
Stay with OES.
Yeah, I would stay with it. I would support OES and then a phase two if, once
Yeah.
there's the fill-up or there's not I think there has been room in other projects, of
Yes.
course. We haven't hit 100% of Orleans' local preference, so there will be availability for those regional,
Yeah.
but
I'll just say, I am also prepared to support this, but I have some, my concerns that I just want to express because going back to the very beginning of this process, when we had the committee that John Sargent was chair of to find out what to do with it, one of the consistent messages that was given right from the get-go from many, many different sources was that it really mattered what this place would look like.
It has to look good, is what he said.
Yeah.
It
So,
has to look good.
so I think, admittedly, this project is far down the road, so there's a lot of that there. But to the extent that there are architectural treatments and inserts that can be done to make the massing less visually unappealing, I would pass that message along, that I think I would like to see the architects from the applicants really make a real effort to do that, rather than just sort of, give lip service to it.
I think we all, I think the directive coming out of those recommendations was to maximize the amount of housing on the property and to maximize its affordability. But in turn, I think we all want a project we can be proud of. We've all put a lot of time and into this, and certainly I think the visual and design of the property is a key indicator of success here. We have great partners, and I do think that that they'll be receptive to hearing comments.
And just to follow up, I think that the town's sort of scorecard on it, when it's there and everybody's looking at it, is going to really matter to the future, especially of the new zoning that we've put in place. So I think it's in everybody's interest to try to satisfy that aesthetic.
Yeah, agreed.
Shall we have a motion?
we do have a motion.
Oh, we do have a motion. Do any further comments?
Not from me.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous, 5-0.
Thank you.
But those, I guess, various inputs that have been made here somehow are going to get passed along.
They will, certainly we will, I'll work with the town manager's office to draft a letter from the select board to the ZBA, and to the extent there are other comments, we will either have that conversation with the developer or put them directly in the ZBA record.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Next on the list is the Select Board Policy on Environmental Sustainability and Climate Action. And maybe just to save us a little time here, last meeting, we said that we would vote to approve it, knowing that we would come back and have the power to make changes if we wanted to. And Michael has been happy with the policy in a whole, with the exception of Section 11, which is the section that speaks to fertilizers and pesticides. So one of the options that we could have tonight anyways is to put on a future agenda, a future work session agenda, that Section 11 for us to work through, and not try to do it here tonight, but with some time to be prepared. So with that, I'll just let Michael
Thank you.
take
Thank you,
it
Mr.
from
Chair.
there.
Yeah, I'm open to that, of course. I would just, let's put it on the next workshop that we can review it. In looking at it, the policy's from 2012. the rest of this was an excellent job, and I thank you to Mark and Kim, and of course Kevin shepherding this through. We had tried to tackle these policies way back in '24, and we never got to them, and we finally did it, or are finally doing it. But when we look at policies 1 through 10, they're all in the framework of 2026. We didn't go back to an EV policy of 2012. We didn't go back to a solar policy of 2012. A lot has happened since 2012. We have so much more knowledge. We have committed over $100 million to clean our waters. We know what the 3 major causes are. We just even heard it tonight since the beginning, and they're still the 3 major causes. And we've gone through since 2012. We did these home rule petitions, warrant articles. We went through a year-long process for both fertilizer and for pesticides. We had public work sessions. We had public hearings. We worked with every committee, just about every committee that was related to water and the environment in this town and on Cape Cod, from the Cape Cod Commission to the Assembly of Delegates to the county commissioners, to our nonprofits, OCT, OPC. I mean, I could go on, and I think I've given some information out to the select board and staff of, the organizations that supported this. Then we went to town meeting, and the town meeting supported it. To kind of then go backwards, in my opinion, to a policy of 2012 doesn't seem like we're moving forward at all. I just think we need to replace it. We have the wording that's all done. I love it. I don't know another policy in any of the sections that had gone through a more rigorous review and that actually went and took public participation to craft this, and we are where we are. So I would like to suggest that we take our warrant articles that were revised over and over again, and we craft those into the policy. Mark could, if he would be willing to help with that, and then we can review it together and vote it at a workshop. But that is the most supported information that we have, and I also take it great pride in the Board of Water and Sewer this year, who really took a step out there with the water restrictions. That isn't the same thought process in 2012. None of this stuff that we're doing in wastewater is our thought process from 2012. We need this current with what the town has asked for. And I do appreciate Lynn in the audience and her comments on what was the 2012 policy, but it really just needs to be what the town voted. I'm excited. It'll be the only policy we have in a select board policy that was actually voted at town meeting. And that really shows that the residents were behind it. So I'll leave it at that. If there's any questions, let me know. Yeah.
I just want to mention that I was looking through the language of the home rule petition that's been filed. I think it'd be really simple to take that language and adapt it into a policy that staff can understand.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with that? I mean, we're essentially making the same kind of promise that we made last meeting to work on, in this case, just section 11 at the next work
This is
session.
very specific, I think, as Mark just alluded to it, it's very specific and very straightforward to do that. The nebulous thing we talked about at the last meeting, so yeah, I think it's a good step and make it happen a lot easier and more quickly.
So, not clear that we need a vote on this. We just, we voted on this last time. Is there any,
I mean, just a consensus, I guess, that we're gonna,
Yeah.
when's the next workshop? Do we have something on the calendar right now, Molly?
I think it's on the 17th.
That we would just address this at the workshop?
so that's
on
the,
17th?
that's the next meeting. That's our next
Yeah.
meeting.
So I would make a motion that we look at number 11 at the workshop on the 17th. It just-
Second, so we have a motion and a second. Anybody want to say anything more?
I guess I just had one question, which was that, and I guess this will get changed if all the wording is changed, but the way this section was structured was completely different from the way the other ones were structured. So all of a sudden, there were these goals and measurable things and whatever, which I wasn't quite sure. I mean, they all sounded interesting, but I wasn't sure that that's where these should be. Or we should have the same sort of thing in the other policies. So it seemed to be just a disconnect as to how it was structured and where those measurable goals.
And Mark will fix that.
Yeah, Mark will.
Again, I was hands-off on section 11. I was not touching any.
Oh, I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
I was leaving that alone, but this will change and
No,
address
no,
your
that's fine.
concerns.
And if we could just have these two as separate things, in case one of them passes, you know what I mean, and one
Yeah.
doesn't. So could be 11 and 12.
Oh, okay, so
You know
you'd
what I
like to
mean?
see it as separate. Yep, we can.
Because they're separate, they were separate articles, they were worked on separately.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second.
Second, yep.
All in favor, say aye.
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 So that's for June 17th now.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 10 is the liaison assignments, which I'm working on, and Molly is doing up a first draft kind of with the changes and assignments, which I will get out to you tomorrow, and we can really, I think, if you have any input for me, you can just contact me directly, and we can talk about it. But I would like to probably have this settled by the next meeting. Now, the next is the consent agenda, and I've already had conversations, and Michael's been part of it, but in this consent agenda, the G, the section G, has, I think, enough discussion needs that the suggestion is that we pull that out of the consent agenda and do it separately. And if that is satisfactory to everyone else, we can do the consent agenda now, excluding section G, or we can exclude section G and talk about that first and then get to the consent agenda, either way.
Doesn't matter to me.
Make a motion to exclude it.
I'm just curious, Mr. Chair, I, for some reason, not seeing section G.
Yeah, I don't know what G is.
What
either.
G is?
It's on the agenda. It's on the back page.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
And this just had to do with people that are,
Gotcha.
Oh, I see.
affected by term limits.
Okay.
So we can talk about that separately, but in the meantime, if anybody would like to move the consent agenda without section G.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the consent agenda excluding section G for separate discussion.
Second?
Motion's made and seconded. Any more discussion?
Just one, Mr. Chair. We're under 11F, approving reappointments, in particular number 2 for the Board of Water Sewer Commissioners. I did note that on the table from Molly, she's noting the wrap-up of John Meyer's term, and I've worked with him for so many years. I just want to do a shout-out to thank him for incredible years of service, his expertise, in so many ways in this town, so he will be missed.
Yep. Thank you for that, Kevin. So we have a motion and a second. Do we want to, ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's 5-0, and now we're left with discussing separately section G. And I don't know, you were spending some time with that, Michael, if you want to maybe
Sure, I
just
could set
explain.
it up a little bit, or just, yeah. So we have 3 positions here that have, 2 of them have reached the term limit. One is the Community Preservation Committee, which is Joan Francolini. I would suggest to the committee that, we're in the middle of restructuring the CPC. I think I've mentioned it at a couple meetings. The town staff and Joan have done an amazing job with finance and Mark and all of that. And I would like to see that through a cycle, and suggest to the board that we would extend by 1 year for Joan. Skipping to number 3, that is Kevin Higgins. I think we all know about Veterans Park. We're getting in that final stretch. He has been invaluable in making that happen, and would love to see him be able to see the completion of the park. And again, I would suggest to the board respectfully to extend that by 1 year. Number 2, the Conservation Commission. This was an interesting one because I had this on our sheet as when we put the multi-member body policy together, there were 4 people that had been associate members that then became full regular members again. And we had decided at the time in the policy, out of the hundreds of people, that those 4 people would be grandfathered in. I don't need to go into the names and the different committees, but I think, Molly, if you guys are interested. But one of them was this person on the Conservation Commission, Judith Bruce, and it was a fresh term that she got when we made that policy. As you know, it was a very tricky policy. I think it served us well as a town. I think Molly can discuss how the committee organization was prior to that and how it's been since then, if you guys wanted to hear. But I think it has, as you know, not that we're talking about the policy as much, but it's listed here as a multi-member body policy. It has brought so many new voices to this town and to committees. Over 100 people, I believe, since we put the policy together, have been able to join committees that, for reasons whatever, there wasn't availabilities before. And we have exercised our right when we see the need to extend in a reasonable way. So I'll leave it at that. But I guess the motion is for number 1, Community Preservation, Joan Franklin, to be extended 1 year. The Conservation Commission, that is not a term limit, so that just goes away. And the Veterans Committee is a 1-year extension for Kevin Higgins.
So, Mr. Chair, could I just clarify? So we are talking about agenda item G 1, 2, and 3, which is CPC, CONSCOM, and vets.
Right.
So you said it goes away, but what I thought I heard you say is she started her term fresh, so we do want to.
You're right. We do need to renew her.
There we go.
Right, but it's not a term expiration. It's the second term of.
Just be reappointed for another.
Okay.
Okay, so I apologize, Kevin.
That's-
you're right.
that's fine.
To change that it just gets reappointed to another term,
Another 3-year term.
another 3-year term.
So was that a motion?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? If not, vote please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's 5-0. And I'll just make one comment on the select board discretion. Kevin Higgins could have this job forever, as far as I'm concerned. So
I know.
we'll have to figure that one out.
You know, if I could just pick up on that too, and Kevin is a unique individual, but even in conversations that I've had with Kevin, his concern is, I think, what we have talked about here as a board for a number of years, going back to, I think, what Andrea brought up initially, way back, about having a succession plan. And even Kevin has talked about, is he's saddened by the fact that, some of our veterans are aging out. And, getting the newer veterans from, sadly, more recent combat and military service times is essential to continue this committee on. And, he's actively looking for people to do that. And so, yeah, it's great that Kevin, we can do this, and he wants to do this to finish up the park, but he's also very conscious of the fact that we need to have, as Michael alluded to earlier, those new people coming in that can help carry on, so we have a viable succession plan for these things.
So on that, Mark, we did have discussions about this committee, and the discussion was maybe to expand the committee with 2 additional associate positions, which would, get in that succession planning direction. And we have 2, I think, interested people now, so.
Yes.
Probably maybe at the next meeting, we can,
We'll be talking about it when we talk about the FY '27 Select Board goals.
yeah, okay. But anyways, so,
A whole plan
we're all set with the consent and with,
to work.
item G, so, we'll go on to the liaison updates if we have any. Start down with you, Kevin, and we can work our way up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick one, but we had our first of what will be 4 community meetings on the Nauset Regionalization and Efficiency Study. Orleans presented last night. Thanks for fellow board members from being here. Orleans Elementary was here. We had a really good turnout, and I have to say, given it being a dry run, the consultants did an excellent job. They really did. I mean, the slides were, I think, given the dense material that could have been just, the second slide could have put people to sleep, and they did not. I think the slides were interesting. Information was prompting really good discussion. I think that, as I've said to many people now, over and over again, we not only presented what the work was, but we also made it very clear what it wasn't. And I think that message really came through loud and clear, because some of the questions and comments we had were, why don't you consider this? And have you thought about this? All good. So again, we start with some data, a good foundation, and as folks saw in the very last slide, if you look at the governance structure, meaning the org chart of our school district, the region, and the locals, I mean, it would make your head explode. And I think that message came through loud and clear, which, again, to the point of the steering committee, we never really rolled up our sleeves and worked to the extent we did on all the other aspects, but we will. So, again, thanks for everybody showing up. You'll have 3 other venues if you wish to continue to share your thoughts, both in Brewster, Eastham, and Wellfleet, and steering committee will regroup, and on we go.
Thank you, Kevin. Mary?
Really don't have much to report, no.
There was meetings of the Transportation and Bikeways, the Architectural Review, and CONSCOM that I went to, and the only one that I would mention is that the Architectural Review Committee is working their way through this comprehensive permit request, and they, I think with good guidance and assistance from George Meservey, will get there, but it's going to be a challenge, and see how that comes out.
I just had one committee, the Veterans and Veterans Committee, and they recapped Memorial Day, and thanks for everybody showing up, and Kevin for speaking, and it was a huge turnout, and it was the first event that was in the park, and they did an amazing job, and I think people were very emotional, and they got to see their family and their bricks and different things like that, and as I've said before over and over again, the 501c3 has done an amazing job. The contractors, the main head contractor, Russ Kleecamp was the keynote speaker, and everything was just great. And Kevin as a master of ceremonies, and that's something we may think of a new position, maybe a master of ceremonies that could be added to the town. But, so that was that. Again, we talked about the ZBA. The efficiency was a great presentation last night. I echo everything Kevin said. And I think Mary even brought up during there, of course, the governance was really, I think, a surprise to everybody. And I think as whatever project goes forward that they work towards, it's always going to be cleaner and easier to do if that governance is cleaned up before. I did think that there was a comment from Scott Zenke, and I do think it's worth being looked at, and I would like to echo that. If there should be, I think we're going to be remiss unless we actually look at that. By the time the end comes, somebody's going to ask, why didn't we look at housing all elementary school children in the middle school, and the middle school moves up to the high school, and what that would cost in not just renovating the one school, the maintenance going forward over the years. I I know people are very protective about having the elementary schools in their own town, and I know on some of the scenarios, there was the idea of the youngest grades being in maybe the local towns, and then the older grades maybe moving up to the middle school as a combination with the middle schools. I don't know, it's beyond my pay grade, but I think there is something there, and I'd hate to get to all the way to the end of this process and find out that that wasn't considered. So I do thank you for bringing that up. But thank you to Kim, and thank you to Kevin for working on this committee, and
Gail as well.
And Gail as well from Orleans, and it was nice to see. I think I talked to the presenters after, and I think they did an amazing job, and the information, and I think it's going to only get better in the next I think they're doing 3 more presentations. So those are my comments. I can put them in writing to you guys too if you want, but what?
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, okay, good.
I just want to clarify that the scope, because Peter and I wrote this grant for this study, only included the elementary schools, and then we asked the district if we could include the middle school. There was a lot of discussion around the committee about why we weren't considering moving kids to the high school. It's because the high school was not included in this study. There was also a lot of conversation and debate about why we weren't considering moving kids up to the middle school, which isn't being proposed. The middle school is proposed as it is right now. So I think it's important that we just make sure we're saying what the facts are, which are, right now, it's configurations only of the elementary schools, and we did look at the middle school. And really, we looked at the middle school to assess what type of work we think that it would need in the future, so that we could use that to help us determine our decision-making about how many schools get fixed or replaced.
And if I could just, one interesting data point that was made at the meeting was that for every 6 affordable housing units we create, 1 student emerges from that for the region. So if you do arithmetic, I think that, there's been a lot of speculation about what all the new housing is going to do to enrollments. And I think if you use that number, if that number is correct, then it's not going to be as impactful as maybe some people hoped.
Just on that note, though, I think in Orleans anyway, our commitment is not to affordable housing that generates that 1
Right.
kid per 6 units.
Yeah, it's a good point.
We're focused on the attainable housing for the working families and the young families and the younger people, so that, as we start to see the impact of the attainable housing here in town, that number is not going to be valid.
I think the most horrifying chart I saw was the one that showed cost and enrollment. And, because that, your per pupil cost will just continue to go up, and it becomes a non-meaningful number because of the fixed cost of just having a building with teachers in it. So I think what was clear to me was that there had to be, as we start going forward, there are lots of bigger questions around the systemic, what the system is and how buildings are utilized, which is even a bigger question. And then there's also the whole thing of, I think the trap that we fall into often as non-education professionals is that we think of school the way it was when we went to school or when our kids went to school, and that has nothing to do with what the school is like now. So how do we constantly shift how we're thinking what education is supposed to look like and what those buildings are supposed to do? Because it brings up all those issues around, well, you have this building, okay, well, it's only used X amount of days, X amount of time, it's empty a lot, and it's a public, it's a public facility, but we're not using it,
Maximize.
365 days a year. So I think it just brings up all those kinds of questions of thinking about how are we dreaming about the value of education and how we build it. So that just, it was, that kept me up thinking for things.
And I'm just going to call timeout on this.
No, that's fine,
because,
that's fine.
Liaison.
We'll keep going, I know.
It's not an agenda item.
Well, right, and I do think we should follow with just one positive factoid, if anyone is listening and they're gonna tune back in, which is every scenario, that was narrowed down in the presented scenarios includes a school in Orleans. And I think that is a really key takeaway. I mean, it's true that no decisions have been made, and these are just, they're not even recommendations, they're options. And the financing of what comes next is probably the biggest conversation for the region, more so than who wants what, it's who can afford what. So this has a long way to go, but I think in terms of our community, what they should hear, if they don't want to watch or hear, is that under all of these circumstances, a school is being proposed to remain in Orleans, and I think that's important.
Thank you, Kim. Mark, did you have other liaison reports that you wanted to?
No, we touched on
Okay.
things that I've been, so.
So last thing here is the future agenda items. Anybody have a request?
We have, I need to add something to the agenda about the situation with the Nauset Regional School District about previous assessment calculations, so we should
Saw that
probably.
in the Chronicle today.
Oh, it's, what?
The Chronicle carried an article about Brewster's allocation.
Oh, okay, great, then I feel better. But we should talk about it. We had a meeting about that today. We are working on solutions, but I think it's important to sort of highlight.
June 17th?
I won't be here on the 17th. There's no immediate action. If there is, I can certainly, Darren and Cedric and Mark were there with me. So if something immediate comes up before the 17th, we could talk about it, but that should be added.
Yeah, I think, is this moving to something that we would vote on?
I think at some point you would vote on the strategy for compensation, recompensation,
Okay.
or distribution of dollars.
Looking forward to that.
Right.
Read the
Previous
Chronicle.
year dollars, yes,
Oh, previous year.
yeah, every year.
So we have one last,
Mr. Chair, I would move at 7:16 that we adjourn.
Second?
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.